The Scene Maker, Shadow Boxes and Other Scenes. Part 1, The Beginning. I love to make a scene, but not in a bad way, like with being a drama queen. The world has enough of those, and my life surely has enough of those in it. In the last 20 years, I have sold thousands of scenes that I've built. People love them, and I love making them. I want to show you a few of them and give you a little background on what made me develop a love for this particular art form. Over the next few weeks, I'll be adding segments to follow up on this that will show you some of the shadow boxes that I've made that I particularly love. But first, in the beginning here, let's take a look at a couple of my favorites so you know what I'm talking about. This first one is one that I gave to my daughter Charlene a number of years ago, and it features items that I dug up in my backyard at 1016 Stevens Street in Saginaw, Michigan. I really like the items in this particular shadow box, and the box is uncluttered and simple, so it makes it a really nice look all around. The pieces in this shadow box are circa 1900 to 1920, and while not in perfect condition by any means, but in the shadow box they become an attractive accent piece and very collectible. Of course, the bee that's in the scene was not found in the backyard. The weeds in the cup I picked and dried. And this scene measures about 8 by 10 inches and was built in the summer of 2013. The second one is a personal favorite of mine. It was sold on eBay for around $45. This features two charming figures, a boy and a girl. These were both made in Japan, probably in the 1930s or 1940s. These figures I bought at a yard sale, whereas I really like to use things that I actually dig up. Sometimes I do have to purchase things, but I very, very, very rarely spend over $2 on any item that I purchase to put into a box. And now that this room is quite special to me, and I really like the rustic way that it looks. The back wall is constructed of shards of plaster which I found under my house on Stevens Street. These were likely from a house that had previously been on the site and are well over 100 years old. One side of the plaster shards is rough, and the other side of the shards are finished with a smooth material which probably formed the exposed inside wall that would be painted in the room. In some of these pieces you even can see horsehair, which helped as a binding agent. They used horsehair and other readily available things to mix with the plaster so that it would bind together. Now the light fixture on the ceiling was made from an old ear examination tool from a doctor's visit, and the metal bell is from an old bicycle. Then the little cat in the left-hand corner is also made in Japan, and let's face it, every house needs a cat. On the back wall is a wooden plaque which has attached to it an old address keychain piece. All the marbles were ones that I dug up in my backyard. And lastly, the hutch was from Michael's craft store. Now that I've shown you a couple of my creations, let me tell you a little bit about my past that set me up for loving to do the artwork like this. There were two different things early on in my life that helped fuel the passion I have for creation. The first were several different color form sets. Do you know what a color form set is? I mean, do they even make them anymore? I don't know. The first one I had was a kitchen set with a completely black background and different colored pieces, like a refrigerator whose door would open and you could position the food around in it. And then there was a stove as well as pots and pans and other kitchen items. This would have probably been around 1960, 1961. Then later, I had a really cool set that was based on the original Addams Family TV show with John Astin and Carolyn Jones. That was an awesome set, made more enjoyable because I loved everything creepy and spooky. And by that time in my life, I was collecting those types of things. And I had other sets also, but these two stand out the most in my memory. The second influence on me for building scenes was my dad. Him and I did not have a great deal in common, but the love for building shadow boxes and scenes came from him. But he only did his work at Christmas time. You see, we had a beautiful brick fireplace and a wooden mantle that was across it that was solid oak. It was about 5 to 6 feet long, and every Christmas he turned it into a wonderland with fake snow, gnomes, Santa Claus, reindeer, nativity, church, and so very much more. To my dismay, there are no existing photographs of any of his annual creations, so the pictures I'm showing you now are similar to what he made, but nowhere near as nice. There was only one time that my dad did not do the scene himself. It was, I believe, 1970, and Dad was in the hospital recovering from a heart attack, and my brothers and sisters were all gone by that time, and it was just Mom and I at home. We decided to go ahead and decorate the fireplace because Dad, if all went well, would be back home by Christmas. So I took over the job and did a pretty nice Christmas scene myself, if I must say so. Beginning in 1968, I took my scene building to a different level than my dad had ever done. At that point in my life, I had already developed a great love for the past and collected small antiques. Because of a television program called Dark Shadows, which wove storylines in and out of the past, I became interested in the history of Bridgeport, Michigan, where I lived. And this interest led to an awful lot of cool things that I did that kids my age normally would not do. As my collection grew, I wanted to display some of the pieces so other people could enjoy them as well. And at that time, on the corner of State Street and the Dixie Highway, was an old building. It's still there, actually, but it's been renovated. But that was being used at that time as a dry cleaner. And being an old storefront, it had large display windows in front. But there was one problem. There were no displays in the windows. So I decided that I would go in and talk to the owners to see if they would let me have the space to do an historical display of Bridgeport. I was 14 years old at the time, and while they did not want to discourage me, my mom and dad tried to prepare me that they might not go for the idea. But even then I believed the saying, nothing ventured, nothing gained. So I went ahead and met with the business owner, and he agreed to allow me to do a display there for a month. The display made the newspaper and was good publicity for the dry cleaner as well as for my growing collection of Bridgeport relics. I don't remember for sure, but Dad must have helped me pack things into his car, and I spent the better part of an afternoon setting up that display. It consisted of a female mannequin that I borrowed from Mr. and Mrs. Baxter, who would play a vital part in a bigger display I would do in 1969. Anyway, she was dressed in a circa 1890s pale lavender dress with bustle. The dress was authentic and was borrowed from Dwayne Sawaski, who had more than a normal interest in women's clothing, if you get my drift. Other items in the scene were circa 1890s photos of the township, part of an old Edison cylinder phonograph, and various other small items. The display was a success, and it actually stayed up for about 2 months. The dry cleaner wanted me to come up with another display, but I came up with something bigger and better and began working on that right away. Anyway, this was the first public scene or display that I created. Now I decided that I either had in my collection, that what I had in my collection, I could do a much larger display in a building all by itself, and what I didn't have in my collection, I knew I could borrow. So in early winter, I began putting the pieces together to make this happen. The librarian at Bridgeport Junior High was a Mrs. Draves, and she took an interest in me and what I was doing. At the time, I was publishing an independent school newspaper, which each issue featured an article about Bridgeport history. I discussed with her my idea for a larger display, but that I would need to find someone who owned a building who would let me use it for about a week. I'll be darned, she knew someone she thought would do it. And then, when I found out the names, I was sure they would do it. It was Mr. and Mrs. Baxter again, who had lent me the mannequin for the store window display. Stick with me here through part 1, because in the next installment, I'll get to the scenes I made and sold, but this stuff is necessary to understand why I love to create scenes. The Baxters owned a building that was on the Dixie Highway, or is, and it was formerly known as the Flower Box, where flowers were sold, hence the name. The building was empty, and the Baxters agreed to let me have the building free for an entire week in late May, early June, which again was in 1969. So I began lining up more items to use in the display, and people came up to the plate in a big way, and not only loaning things to me, but giving items to me for my collection. And the week before the display, the keys were turned over to me so I could get started setting up the whole thing. I had a great time doing it, too. A friend of mine, Mike Howe, who was sort of an underdog with the kids our age, as I was a really good artist, and he painted the huge picture window with a detailed map of Bridgeport at the turn of the century. Now, other kids who I was friends with, volunteered to be at the display to show people around and keep an eye on things. Bonnie Taylor was one, and Melody Chapman was another. The week of that display was one of the most awesome weeks from when I was a kid. I remember one day I was excused from school so that I could go open up the display to kids who were being bussed over to see it. For a kid who was pretty much disliked by the popular crowd, this felt great. For once, I was in the limelight, and I was enjoying it. The display got quite a bit of media attention too. WNEM came out with Mark Wesley and Jim Rush to interview me. My Aunt Florence up in Ascot even saw the newscast. There were nice articles also in the Bridgeport Future, the Saginaw News, and the Bay City Times. And WSAM Radio also did several small features about the display. So all in all, there was no need for me to worry about publicity. The display and my age took care of everything. There were many special guests and well over 1,000 people who attended my first display scene. This led to another display scene the following year, but a different location. It was located at the Bridgeport Community Church on State Street. It also led me to writing for the Bridgeport Future Weekly about the history of Bridgeport and the creation of the Historical Society of Bridgeport. Thanks for taking the time to stop by and see the first installment, and I hope you'll come back and look at the next installment and see some of the creations that I've made and have sold or have made and currently are adorning the walls in my small apartment here. Thanks again.